How's it going, everyone? Marriland here. It's been over a year since I introduced the Wedlocke challenge to YouTube, inspiring people to play their Pokemon games in a challenging new way, and expanding on the ideas of the original Nuzlocke rules. Now, I'm back in black, you could say, ready to start up the second Wedlocke challenge for my channel, the Black Wedlocke. While the Wedlocke rules remain the same, I want to share them again with you in order to remind you of the rules of the Wedlocke challenge. And, on top of that, I will be clarifying some of the rules and situations that the previous Wedlocke rules did not account for. The first three rules are nearly identical to the main rules of a Nuzlocke challenge. Rule number 1. Fainted Pokemon are considered dead. Part of what makes Nuzlocke challenges so difficult is that fainted Pokemon must forever be removed from your party, since they are considered dead for storyline purposes. They must be either released permanently or, optionally, may be placed in a dedicated box in the PC. I personally release any fainted Pokemon on my video series, but either approach is acceptable. Rule number 2. You can only catch the first Pokemon in any new area. Whenever you enter a new route or area, you're only able to catch or receive the first Pokemon you encounter on that route or area. You aren't forced to catch it, but you don't get any other chances to get Pokemon. There are a few other important things to note about this rule in regards to the Wedlocke challenge, though. 1. Genderless Pokemon cannot be caught, ever. They do not count as your first encounter, and you ignore them entirely. This includes genderless legendary Pokemon. 2. If you have 1, 3, or 5 Pokemon on your team, you ignore any encounters that are of the gender you have the most of. Meaning, if you have 2 males and 1 female in your party, you ignore any male Pokemon and do not count them as your encounter. If you have 2, 4, or a full team of 6 Pokemon on your team, the encounter's gender doesn't matter. This is referred to as Gender Clause. 3. Dupes Clause. To avoid having a team full of nothing but Rattata or Poochyena, some players may choose to enable Dupes Clause, which allows you to ignore any encounters you've already caught, making it so they don't count as your first encounter. Some players may choose to treat the whole evolution line as a duplicate, while others only go by the caught symbol. It's your choice. Additionally, to keep yourself from exploiting this clause to catch rare Pokemon, you may limit how many times per route or area Dupes Clause is triggered. So, for instance, you set a limit of 3 and then run into 3 Pokemon you already have, you hit your limit and don't get anything in that area. That's your choice though. I personally will be playing with a limit of 5 for the Black Wedlocke. Evolution Line Dupes Clause is highly recommended in a Wedlocke, but not required. Rule number 3. All Pokemon must be nicknamed. This is to increase the bond between you and your team and to allow their personalities to shine. So giving your Pokemon names is a great way to bring your story to life. Some people may choose to use a naming theme, while others may name their Pokemon whatever comes to mind. What you name your Pokemon doesn't matter, so long as you nickname them something. Of course, in the case of Wonder Wedlocks, let's say, in Pokemon X or Y, or in the case of traded or gift Pokemon in-game, you have no control over this rule, and that's fine, but you should nickname anything you're able to nickname. Rule number 4. Your Pokemon are partnered and fight together in pairs. Yeah, this is where the Wedlocke part of the challenge rules truly begin. Instead of treating your Pokemon party as one team of 6 Pokemon, it's essentially 3 teams of 2 Pokemon, each team consisting of 1 male and 1 female Pokemon in the standard Wedlocke rules. Imagine receiving your starter Pokemon and that it's male. According to rule number 2, you'd only be able to catch the first female Pokemon you run into. Once you catch it, since you have a male and a female Pokemon, they're paired. Once Pokemon are paired, they are paired until one dies or is released. Pokemon are only paired while they're in your party. Pokemon in the PC that you've caught after your team is full are not paired until they are withdrawn. Additionally, while it is possible for a pair to consist of a single Pokemon, which I refer to as lone wolves, they must be paired immediately with any compatible Pokemon in the PC, and if such a Pokemon isn't in the PC, they can still fight, but only on their own. Each Pokemon on your team can battle only alongside its partner, if it has one. This means that, during battle, you can only switch between the two Pokemon in the active pair, and can't switch to any of your other Pokemon pairs unless both Pokemon in the pair die. If one of the Pokemon in the pair dies, its partner is unable to switch out and will have to make it through the fight on their own, or join their fallen partner, if you know what I mean. If the surviving Pokemon makes it through the fight, it must be paired with a new Pokemon from the PC as soon as possible, or if there are no compatible Pokemon in the PC, it becomes a lone wolf until a new compatible Pokemon is caught for it. Also, though rare, keep in mind that the party always takes priority over the PC. If two lone wolf Pokemon can be paired in your party, they must be paired. The experience share item is perfectly acceptable to use, even if held by a Pokemon outside of the active pair. The switch training tactic, though, cannot be used to train Pokemon from different pairs. Lastly, you cannot swap partners around, meaning once two Pokemon are paired, they're paired for good, unless they die or are willingly released. However, you can still switch your active pair with a different one outside of battle, just not inside of battle. Rule number 5. You cannot deposit Pokemon to your PC. To add to the challenge and force players to be creative in their strategies, Pokemon cannot be deposited to the PC under the Wedlocke rules. The only way to withdraw anything in your PC is to either have something die or to release it for good. Should you choose to release a Pokemon that's alive, it isn't technically considered dead, but its heart will surely be broken and you'll feel like a jerk. However, sometimes it may be necessary to do this for the greater good. Pokemon that are caught and then sent to your PC are not counted as being deposited in that way, so don't worry about them. Those Pokemon also aren't paired while they're in there. Think of them as bonus Pokemon to replace any fallen pairs. There are a few exceptions to this rule. Obviously, if you don't release your fainted Pokemon and store them in a death box, you may still do so. If you need to make room for gift Pokemon, you may temporarily deposit a Pokemon from one of your pairs in order to receive the gift Pokemon. The rules treat this Pokemon as still being in your PC, so make sure you make things right by depositing that Pokemon and withdrawing the temporarily deposited Pokemon as quickly as possible. HM moves must be taught to your party Pokemon if you want to use them, although if they are required for proceeding through the game, you may temporarily deposit one pair to withdraw one or two dedicated HM Pokemon that may not participate in battle at all. They should be deposited as soon as you have a Pokemon capable of using the HM move you need, or as soon as you are past wherever required the HM move. Anyway, those are the main rules of the Wedlocke Challenge. They should cover the majority of what you need to know about attempting the Wedlocke Challenge, and you may feel free to include any other rules to affect the difficulty. You may also soften up some of the rules should you feel so inclined, but that's up to you. That's all you should need to know while watching my Black Wedlocke series, or most other Wedlocke video series out there. But after my first Wedlocke series, there were several situations that came up and questions that kept recurring, so I'm going to address some potential issues in Wedlocke challenges. What happens if something uses Roar or Whirlwind? If you're in a battle and something uses Roar, Whirlwind, or a similar move forcing you to switch to a new pair, you now use the new pair as your active pair in battle. That's how it goes. However, this does not mean you can use Baton Pass or Volt Switch to switch to one of your other pairs. You'd still only be able to switch to that Pokemon's partner. What if a Pokemon dies in the middle of a double battle? Let's say you have male A and female A in a double battle. Female A dies, and you need to send in a new Pokemon. The best way to resolve this is to send out male B and have the two males fight. Why? They're not paired or anything, but that way, if either of them die, you send out female B to replace the fallen Pokemon, and you'll be guaranteed to have at least one pair. What do you do about triple battles? Triple battles are a toughie. Let's say you have Pokemon A and B on a team, and C and D on a team. You'd have to use A, B, and C in a triple battle. They can all fight together. It's okay, don't worry. However, if any of those three die, D must be sent out to replace the fallen Pokemon. What about rotation battles? They're essentially the same as triple battles as far as handling deaths and stuff goes, except you're only able to rotate between the two Pokemon in the active pair. You can rotate between A and B, but not to C. If A or B dies, you send out D, let's say. If that happens, though, you must rotate between C and D, since they're the only valid pair. If the male from A and B and the female from C and D dies, you'd pair the survivors on the spot and rotate between them. What do I do about gift Pokemon? If you need to receive one, it's acceptable to deposit a Pokemon to your PC temporarily in order to pick it up, though this process should be done as quickly as possible, and the gift Pokemon is considered as in your PC throughout the whole process. However, early on, if your team contains 1, 3, or 5 Pokemon and received a gift Pokemon that is of the wrong gender, you must treat it as a second Lone Wolf pairing or deposit it to your PC right away. What about Pokemon that must be caught or received? Things like Reshiram or Zekrom that absolutely must be caught in order to proceed through the game, even though they cannot normally be caught per the Wedlocke rules, are permitted to be caught, although cannot be used. These Pokemon should be sent to the PC and not used in any battles. If they absolutely must be used, spam stat moves until they die. What about a gay, lesbian, bi, or so on variant? First of all, if hearing about this kind of stuff bothers you, you should probably leave right now. But I'm personally all for people loving rather than hating. And if players want to play Pokemon that way as well in a Wedlocke variant, it's important to keep the following in mind. Playing with such pairings inherently changes the dynamic of the challenge. I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean that's how it is and how it affects the difficulty. Let me explain. For instance, let's say you only want to use a single gender and then pair, say, only female Pokemon together. That's fine and dandy and all, but keep in mind that you miss out on one of the more challenging parts of the Wedlocke. The restriction of which Pokemon can be paired together, meaning you can form any pair you want from your selection. That definitely makes the challenge substantially easier, and you're missing out on one of the core parts of it. If you want to mix straight pairings with gay or lesbian pairings, that's fine too, but that also inherently assumes all boxed Pokemon are bi, let's just say. A possible way to make this more balanced, though, is to assign, say, 5 or 6 natures as non-straight natures, and Pokemon of those natures can only be paired with Pokemon of the same gender that is also of a compatible nature. Don't want to do that? That's fine, it'll still work, but just consider all of the boxed Pokemon and their preferences. Lastly, the most balanced approach is to play through with no straight pairings. All Pokemon must be paired with Pokemon of the same gender, but you catch both male and female Pokemon. This keeps the integrity of the restriction part of the Wedlocke Challenge pairings. The downside is, you might end up with a team consisting entirely of a single gender, as after your first pair has been paired, you're at the mercy of whatever the next encounter is, and then its partner must be of the same gender. Yeah, it's not the end of the world, but it is still an issue to consider. Hopefully this sheds some light as to why any of these variants weren't included in the original Wedlocke rules video, but if you want to play any of these variants, feel free to pick the one that sounds right for you. Anyway, hopefully that clears up some of the most common questions regarding the Wedlocke Challenge. If you'd like to try a Wedlocke Challenge for yourself, please, by all means, feel free to. They're a lot of fun. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see ya on the first episode of Marriland's Pokémon Black Wedlocke. See ya next time, Wedlockers! Woo!